Takumi finds himself transported to another world, standing before the goddess Nolan. The first thing she does is offer a heartfelt apology, explaining that his summoning was a complete mistake. She reveals that when a summoning spell is cast, it typically targets a random group of Earth's losers to transport them to another world. However, Takumi's life was actually going quite well, so he wasn't supposed to be included. Unfortunately, due to a mishap, he was swept up in the summoning process along with everyone else. The blame falls on the Holy Sidonia Empire, which recklessly activated the summoning spell. Since Takumi wasn't intended to be summoned, Nolan brought him directly to her instead of sending him to Sidonia with the other summoned heroes. Takumi asks Nolan if she can simply send him back to Earth, given that his summoning was a mistake. Unfortunately, she explains that it's not possible. Out of sheer anger at Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell, she immediately removed it from this world's magical laws, ensuring that no one could travel between worlds anymore. As a result, Takumi is now permanently stuck here. To make matters worse, the summoning process technically killed him. When Takumi realizes he's now a disembodied ghost, he begins to panic, but Nolan reassures him that there's no need to worry. While she can't return him to Earth, she can provide him with a new body and help him start a new life as a citizen of this world. As an apology, since this is partially her fault, she offers to grant him her blessing to make his life easier. Takumi doesn't really have much of a choice, so he agrees to be reborn into this world. Nolan is glad to hear that because it makes this a lot easier for her. She tells him to open his status screen to check out the new life he will have. When Takumi does, he finds out that Nolan is planning to give him a 17-year-old body, even though he's 40. Nolan tells him not to bother with the minor details. More importantly, he still needs to pick out his job. She tells him that there are two main classes for jobs. If Takumi wants something more combat-focused, he can pick things like swordsman, knight, or hunter. But if that doesn't appeal to him, he could always pick one of the production jobs instead. Takumi isn't too keen on the idea of fighting, so he opts for a production-focused job instead. Nolan proceeds to embed the job into his soul, along with several extra blessings, before sending him on his way, completely forgetting to provide any sort of tutorial. Takumi crash lands in the middle of a forest, and after managing to get back on his feet, he catches his reflection in a nearby river. It's then he realizes he's truly become a different person, and to his amazement, his arthritis is gone. Deciding to make the most of his new situation, he checks the bag Nolan left with him to see what he's been given. Inside, he finds some food rations and money, which means he doesn't need to worry about starving for the time being. Takumi checks his status screen and sees that Nolan really went all out, granting him an impressive array of useful skills. Among them, he notices elemental magic, so he decides to test it out. Holding out his hand, he calls out "water ball," and instantly, a sphere of water forms in his palm. The other elements work just as seamlessly, and Takumi is able to use them effortlessly on his first attempt. With his newfound magic abilities figured out, he begins to consider his next steps and decides to make his way to the nearest village. While walking, Takumi comes across a stick in the middle of the path. It looks like a really nice stick, so he uses his appraisal skill to scan it and finds out that this is Trent wood. It's gotten from a wood monster and is really useful for making things like magic staves and spears. Takumi decides to put his modeling skill to the test and uses it on the wood to create a spear. Since the wood works so well, Takumi decides to scan around to see if there are any other useful plants nearby. He finds a ton of them, so he spends the next hour picking them. However, he doesn't know what to do with all these plants since they definitely won't fit in his bag. He might have to leave them behind, but then Takumi remembers that he has an item box skill, so he uses it to store all the plants. Suddenly, Takumi hears a scream nearby. Moments later, a little girl bursts out of the bushes and runs straight to him, pleading for help because a monster is chasing her. When Takumi turns to see the creature, he's faced with a massive, horned rabbit. The rabbit charges at him with incredible speed, nearly impaling him, but at the last moment, Takumi panics and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. He's stunned that a beginner like him managed to defeat such a creature, and assumes it must be thanks to Lady Nolan's blessing. In reality, the goddess had nothing to do with it. It was pure dumb luck. After his fight, Takumi is granted the job title of warrior, much to his dismay, as he had hoped to avoid combat entirely. However, he sets that aside for now and checks to see if the little girl is unharmed. She introduces herself as Molly and assures him she's fine, explaining that she was out gathering herbs but wandered too far from Board Village and ended up getting attacked. When Molly mentions a village, Takumi gets excited and asks if he can go there. Molly agrees to guide him, but first points out that the rabbit's meat is delicious and asks if he's planning to take it with him. Realizing it would be a waste to leave it behind, Takumi stuffs the rabbit into his item box. Only then does it hit him that he just revealed his item box skill in front of Molly, even though he intended to keep it a secret. Resigned to his slip-up, Takumi follows Molly as they begin their journey to the village. At the same time, the other people who got summoned have just arrived in the Empire of Sidonia, and they are incredibly confused about what's going on. None of them are hurt, but they have no idea where they are. All of a sudden, they hear someone call out to them as heroes. A woman approaches and tells them that they are no longer in their original world and that they have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself to them as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth, and one look at her face makes the kids realize that she's shady as hell. Just then, Akane's unique skill kicks in, and it seems Nolan granted her the blessing of revelation. If she follows her gut instinct, she will naturally arrive at the right answer. And right now, Akane's gut is telling her that Elizabeth is a traitor, so she can't be trusted. By the time Takumi arrives in Board Village, Molly's parents come out to greet him and thank him for rescuing their daughter. Molly's father introduces himself as Banga, while her mother is Martha. They express their admiration for Takumi, assuming he must be a very responsible person to have traveled such a long distance on his own. Takumi takes the opportunity to ask if it would be possible for him to stay in the village for a while, explaining that he has nowhere else to go. Banga and Martha warmly welcome him, but mention that, unfortunately, there isn't an inn in the village, so there's currently no place for him to stay. However, they suggest a solution. The villagers can build him a house. Soon, the entire village gathers around an empty plot of land, ready to get started. Wanting to contribute in some way, Takumi decides to use his earth magic to flatten the ground for the foundation. It's the first time he's used magic on such a large scale, and the effort nearly causes him to pass out from mana depletion. The villagers are all amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily. Takumi asks if they think he just did something strange, but they tell him not to worry about it, since he has taken care of the foundation. The rest of them get to work assembling his house for him. By the next morning, Takumi's house is completed. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi is able to make a good set of furniture for himself. But there's something else he's been meaning to try out. He got a bunch of ores from the village blacksmith, Boron, and he wants to try using alchemy to extract the metal. Takumi finds himself with iron ore, silver ore, copper ore, and even some magic iron ore. Starting with the iron, he decides to try making an iron ingot. Normally, this process would require a large furnace and several hours of labor, but thanks to his alchemy skill, he's able to do it instantly. However, the process consumes a significant amount of his mana. His first attempt at ore extraction is a success, and Takumi is thrilled with the result. Excited by the possibilities, he resolves to extract as much as he can so he'll have plenty of materials to work with later. After a few hours, Molly stops by Takumi's house to bring him some dinner. When she opens the door, she's horrified to find him collapsed on the floor, looking completely drained. It turns out Takumi had pushed himself too hard with the ore extraction and came dangerously close to dying from mana depletion. Luckily, Martha and Banga gave him a recovery potion, bringing him back to normal. While Takumi is eager to continue practicing his alchemy, he had to promise them he wouldn't overdo it again. Over time, Takumi extracts a bunch of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold, allowing him to make a ton of useful tools. Once he is done with his alchemy practice, He spends time with Boron in the forge, learning how to make all kinds of weapons. The blade he forges turns out really well, and once Boron is done making the sheath, it will be complete. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now at level 40, so he's done practicing that for now and decides to move on to something else. Takumi approaches Banga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions. Banga agrees without hesitation, but he mentions that the potions he has are basic and might not be very useful. Takumi assures him that's fine, explaining that he just needs an example to use as a template. He plans to create his own potions using the herbs he collected from the forest. Impressed by Takumi's initiative, Banga offers his full support and even says he'll buy some potions from him once the first batch is ready. Takumi thanks Banga and, with the basic potion in hand, begins crafting his own version. He uses hillock leaves and water to create it, carefully following his process. Once finished, he pours the potion into a glass jar and compares it to the one Banga provided. Both are blue, but the potion Takumi made is noticeably more vibrant and appears to contain traces of magic. Despite the promising appearance, Takumi isn't sure if it's a success. He knows he needs to test it to confirm it's safe, but the thought of potentially poisoning himself makes him hesitant to take the risk. To build up some poison tolerance, he decides to eat whatever questionable items he can find until he's about to die, and then use healing magic to cure himself. After a couple of hours of this self-destructive experiment, he feels absolutely terrible. On the bright side, curing himself so much has granted him the purification skill, which will definitely come in handy at some point. As Takumi is getting back to his feet, he hears a noise behind him and finds a massive boar staring him down. The boar is clearly hostile, so Takumi readies his spear to defend himself. However, as the boar charges, the spear breaks on impact, leaving the boar unscathed and Takumi defenseless. Desperate, he uses every type of magic at his disposal, but nothing seems to harm the boar. As if things couldn't get any worse, he catches sight of a poison spider creeping up behind him, poised to strike. Takumi realizes he's completely cornered. Instead of attacking Takumi, the spider turns its attention to the boar, throwing off its charge and causing it to miss him. However, the boar isn't backing down and continues its assault, leaving Takumi with little time to react. So far, none of his physical attacks have worked, but there's still one tactic he hasn't tried. As the boar charges at him again, Takumi leaps into the air and, at the moment of impact, uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head to break it down. His quick thinking pays off, allowing him to survive the encounter. Now that he's safe, Takumi decides to check on the spider since it helped him out earlier. The spider is in really poor shape after being hit by the boar. Takumi decides to heal it so it doesn't die. Afterwards, he gets up to return to the village, but then he receives a notification telling him that he has successfully tamed the spider. He didn't realize it was even possible to tame a spider, but he's hesitant to take it with him since spiders are considered dangerous monsters. The spider gives Takumi an adorable look with its cutesy eyes, and despite everything, he decides to accept it as his pet. To make it official, he names her Maple. Not long after, Takumi returns to the village, proudly showing off the massive boar he managed to kill. The villagers are impressed by his feat, but their amazement grows even more when they see the poisonous spider he's tamed. No one has ever accomplished such a thing before, leaving them in awe of Takumi's abilities. Putting that aside, Takumi suggests that the villagers share the boar since there's no way he can finish it on his own. That evening, the village throws a grand feast in his honor. While everyone else is enjoying the festivities, Banga approaches Takumi with the valuable leftovers from the boar and advises him to sell them in the nearest city, Bolton. With that, Takumi decides that Bolton will be his next destination. Meanwhile, Goddess Nolan has been keeping an eye on Takumi and is delighted by how well he's doing. One of her fellow goddesses questions her intentions, asking what she hopes to accomplish by giving Takumi such extraordinary treatment. After all, she provided him with a special body, a unique blessing, and even sent him back an entire year before Sidonia activated the summoning spell. Nolan, however, simply replies that she doesn't have any specific motive. She's just following what she believes to be the right thing to do. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.